going to start building these masks, and we're going to learn to talk about attaching pieces of clay and creating little slab pieces to go on them. I have 2 of the sample masks. I would leave the fabric that supports the structure inside of it, whichever one. I've got a small board here. I'm going to put this one on so as you can see what happens with a small one. And then I think the first thing I would do when I get mine is clean it up a little bit. If there's any pock marks or whatever, do not push on this. It's very flexible and it could change quite a bit. Lost a little bit of my nose here, but I'm going to probably redesign some of that anyway. If I push hard on this, it's likely to collapse. It's fragile, it's soft, it's plastic. We want it to stay that way. Alright, so I've got this one on the little board because it's the small one. If you have one of the larger masks and you get one that has, some of them are pretty plain, others are pretty decorated, and I'd like you to decorate yours your own way. So I'm going to ask that you obliterate and kind of get rid of some of this designing that the casting device gave you. I'm going to support the inside of that while I do this. So one of the things I would like you to do is, if you got one of these really decorated ones, come back and kind of just scratch through that and use the back end of your fingernail. You can use, there's some silverware in the room, you can use a fork. Don't capture air in there, just kind of drag through it. I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff that's not my design. I don't want it to influence me on using the design I like. But I like this oval shape. I kind of like this lifted area here, but I'm going to get rid of all these little pieces. So I'm asking that if you get one that has some of this detail work, you know, obliterate that, get rid of it, so that the design becomes your own. And then if you don't like the fact that it's kind of got texture on it, just take your thumb and smooth it down. If it starts to get too hard to do this, you need to keep more moisture on it. Alright, we're going to add some pieces of clay to this, and I need to talk to you about this. How do you put a piece of clay onto another piece? So I've got my 2 masks. Let's say they're all cleaned up. I'm going to get my other piece of clay that I wedged earlier. And keep in mind, no clay is trash, so I'm going to keep that there. I'm going to take a little piece of this off. And I can roll this, I can push this out if I want into a little flat shape that I can cut. I can use a slab rolling guide if I want. If you want to be very exact about it, you could put a piece of clay between 2 guides and use a rolling pin, and that will give you a nice even piece of clay. And that's an option. A couple different sizes. I'm going to take a tool and I'm going to cut a shape I want to put on this. So let's just say I decide I want to put an eyebrow here like that. I want to get 2 of them, so I'm going to get another piece here. Clay bends, so I don't have to draw it as a curve. Make 2 of them that match here. Okay, so let's say I decide I want to put a piece here on my mask and another piece here, and raise that up so that it becomes more my design. I like that idea. I think I'm going to have this come to a point and then wrap around this way, almost like a ram's horn. Oh, I like that better. Okay. So I can look at my design and my plan and work from that. I can modify it creatively a little bit as I go. But we've got to put these on so that they hold. And if this dries and all I've done is set it on there. If I just push it on there, make it look like it's sticking, kind of smooth it out, it's probably going to fall off when it dries. So what you need to do is you need to follow a couple real specific steps. You're going to take and figure out where you want to put this. I'm going to just mark a little line so I know where I'm going to put this. I'll do that on both sides. Okay, so now I have this little scratch mark. And I'm going to take where this clay is going to attach and a fork or a tool, and I'm going to make, and I'm going to rough up this surface. I'm going to make what's called score marks. To score is to scratch the surface. The idea being that two rough surfaces glue together better than a smooth surface does. It gives it more contact surface to grip onto each other. So I've scratched up the surface I'm going to put this on, and I've scratched up the surface of the piece I'm adding. Then I have this material. This is slip, and slip is just clay that's been watered down. I have a cup with some clay in it, and if it's not broken down enough, you can take a fork, and I always say make baked potatoes into mashed potatoes. You've probably done that before. I just kind of run that fork through it so that I get this kind of creamy consistent, whoops. So I get this kind of cream, glad I had a mat down there. This kind of creamy consistency. And I'm going to put some of this on this surface. I can put it on with my finger. I need to be kind of generous about it. And then I'm going to take this piece of clay and I'm going to stick it where I put that slip. I'm going to kind of compress it down. Okay. And then it doesn't have a lot of structural needs for this to have a lot of it's not a real structural piece, so I don't need to add a coil in there to attach it, but I'm going to take my, I'm going to make sure this really compresses down, and then I'm going to take my knife and just steal a little bit, so I'm kind of merging those two pieces together on this edge. I'm going to be sure you're not adding air when you put your two pieces of clay together. Just steal a little bit. And then I can take my finger or a tool and clean that edge up. Back side of a fingernail, even if it's not long, is great. So I can add a piece of clay on here. Keep in mind I scored both sides. Score both sides, the piece you're putting on and the piece you're putting at. Put slip on it and then compress it down and then blend out the edge by grabbing a little bit of the clay. I can add this piece here. I could take and add little coils, so I could take a piece of clay and make little snakes, but I still need to attach those properly. So here, if I decide I want to put a piece of coil here, I'm going to score that. I'm going to score what I'm putting down. The clay needs to be about the same moisture level because clay shrinks as it dries, and if the clay is much harder or drier, they shrink at different than each other, then they shrink and change at different percentages, and then they tend to pop each other away from each other and they don't stay attached. It's going to be hard for me to know whether you've gone through this process until it dries, and then it will fall apart. So you have to be sure when you attach two pieces of clay, you score both sides, add slip, compress it down, and then you can clean it up. this is kind of getting fun, so I'm going to add some more pieces to it later, and maybe we'll get back to it. You can do the same thing with your, the smaller masks. If you have your designs ready, let me see them. We'll talk about adding some of these details and textures and patterns. And when we clean up, I've got to clean off the tools. Don't have to scrub them. I clean off the tools. Put the extra clay in the slip container. I'm going to take these scraps and I'm going to keep them loose. I do not want to merge them together. If I push all these together, I'm going to have to wedge it again. But I'm going to keep these kind of loose. I'm going to have a wet rag, a wet towel, t-shirt rag. I'm going to put my clay pieces in here. This needs to be damp. I'm going to put this over top of this with my clay pieces here. I'm going to put my project end of class in my bag with my name to the top. Okay, I'm going to fold the opening underneath and I'm going to store this. Do not set your project on top of somebody else's. They're compressible. If there's not room in the cabinet, we'll put them in some other places. When you get done with that, we'll put that away. Tools go back to the back of the room. If you have a mess like I made here, I'm just going to take my hand and put some of that in there. If you want, you can go get a towel from the back. You can get an extra rag. Just kind of clean that up. All the materials go back. Whatever scrap, little pieces of clay are on the desk cover, just fold it up, dump the scraps into the clay bin. Carry it level. If you carry it on an angle, it's just going to drop all over the floor. We're trying to keep the floor from getting too bad. Enjoy. See you later.